before we get in this episode, can you do us a favor? Will you go ahead and subscribe to the channel?
Will you ring that notification bell?
And if you would, give this video a like. Well, enough of that mumbo jumbo. Let's get to the episode.
Let's talk developmentally speaking, glow up, and connecting through wrestling.
Hey everybody, I'm Morty.
And I'm Brian.
And on today's episode of Connecting Through Wrestling, we have a world-renowned photographer and a good friend of ours, Scott Romer. Scott, how's it going?
It's doing great. Thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you for coming on. It's always, Brian and I talk about, it's always a good time when we get to hang out at the different conventions and stuff. We have a great time doing that. Love getting a chance to share your book with people. So let's just cut to the chase. Let's talk about your book starting out here.
Okay, my book is called When It Was My Life on Both Sides of the Camera. I was inspired to write the book by John Cosper. He's the co-author of the book, and I guess you might say ghost writer as well. I gave him all my information over a long period of time, talking in a microphone, and he made sense of everything that I've done. And I accompanied everything with photographs. I have led a very privileged life that I created in both professional wrestling and boxing. And it includes working with U.S. presidents, more than one, prime ministers, traveling worldwide, and the women, of course. And it's all in my book, all the experiences accompanied by the pictures. As a photographer, I would always record and take a picture of me doing extraordinary things in my lifetime. I always thought wrestling was a little different, as well as boxing. So I covered those for both, for also with boxing and wrestling magazines as well. As a photographer, my pictures were published in a lot of the wrestling magazines growing up, as well as boxing matches for boxing magazines.
Oh yeah. Anytime we go anywhere, everyone knows you, everyone loves you. You've got a good rapport with everybody, and it just shows, how much they respect your work and everything you've done. Even at that the Chillicothe, when you capture that moment that Morty was talking about, like you have the eye for it, and capturing all these special moments. Throughout time.
Well, I look for those things in a picture, and it doesn't really matter who the person is. If I see a gleam in their eyes and I see both parties being equally interested in what that person has to say, and I see a moment, I'll take the picture and I'll present it. I have the capabilities of printing pictures on site. I'll print that picture of that moment, get this guy, show it to the person that I took the picture of, and emotionally he'll buy that picture.
Yeah.
And basically, I've been doing that all my life, selling my work and making a living in photography.
Yeah. The picture, the moment, it was Nord the Barbarian or the Berserker and Bushwhacker Luke. I remember it clearly. It's like they hadn't seen each other in years, which they probably hadn't. And it was just this moment, and you caught it, and just like,
Well,
and I even said,
I saw that moment, and I grabbed the camera to make sure the flash was on, took the picture, and captured the gleam in both the subject's eyes and how happy. And those are the pictures that really mean something. It's not having your picture posed with somebody. They're sitting down, you're standing up, they're at a fan convention, they pay money. This is a magical moment that I captured.
Yeah, absolutely. I gotta look. I gotta see that picture someday because I think it's.
I'll send you a copy.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
That's all right. You guys could be the first ones to put it on developmentally speaking on your website.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So, what got you? I know you found wrestling and boxing as interesting, not necessarily the normal everyday thing, but what got you into professional wrestling?
Well, David McLean, creator of Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, G.L.O.W, and I were best of friends in grade school. We went to Orchard Country Day School, And from the get go of meeting him, he and I bonded, fourth grade, and we loved wrestling. And it was a private school, so we got away with a little bit more than what you would get away with at a regular school. We were so infatuated with wrestling, the principal used to let us watch his TV show or watch a TV show called The Jim Gerard Show that was on Channel 6 around 11 o'clock, 11 to 12. And he would let us go into his office, even without him there, and turn on the TV knowing that Dick the Bruiser or Jimmy Valiant or Bobby Heenan was going to be on the TV show.
Oh,
And he
that's
would
cool.
watch it with us. We were just fascinated and loved the business. We would go to the shows together and take pictures. And mine were always really nice, were really good pictures. And then I started selling them at the shows,
Oh yeah.
selling my pictures. I'd make a whole stack of them. And by the time the show was over, I had sold almost every one of them.
Wow.
So you went to school with David McLean. How did Glow come about with David? Like, because did they run an indie for a while?
The, Princess Jasmine was one of the trainers on the early shows of Glow, and I believe he moved out of state to LA and created it there.
Mm-hmm.
Although the plans of making the promotion were done, he's from Indianapolis. He came from a well to do family that lived right across the street from the governor's mansion, the former governor's mansion. And they knew people in the entertainment business. I can remember a family picture with Ed Sullivan. And Ed Sullivan was a TV guy that ran a variety show in the 60s and early 70s, 56 for many years. And there's a picture of Ed Sullivan on the living room couch talking to the McLean brothers.
That's awesome. Wow.
So he used those connections and created a super promotion,
Mm-hmm.
Glow.
Absolutely.
Matt Claimer, I think is his name, who was married to Jane Mansfield,
Matt
was one
Simber.
of his partners. He had, right, that's right, as well as Sylvester Stallone's mother was also a partner. And he, that ran for several years on regular primetime TV. I was impressed. You know, that was my friend that I grew up with that
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
created this great show, and it was fun to watch. He also had Dick the Bruiser's blessings as well, so we were all rooting for him.
Oh yeah. So, how did you get? How did you and Dick the Bruiser meet? Come together? How did that relationship start?
Well, like I said, David and I were taking pictures, and we'd get thrown out. We'd sneak over to the other side, and they were pretty good. And I would send them to the wrestling magazines, and they would. My very first thing that was published was the front cover of Wrestling Guide magazine, Bruiser versus the Sheik, the first Market Square Arena show, and that got around the business. And Sam Miniker, the commentator, put that picture on TV, and our name started becoming synonymous with the WWA wrestling. Um, After we were selling pictures for maybe a year with no under the table, Bruiser found out, and I got a message from the head cop. His name was Cecil Madalena. You wouldn't mess with him. Um, and he said Bruiser wants to see you right now. He took me upstairs to the convention center where Bruiser and Snyder had their own private dressing room, and the other wrestlers were sharing two or three other dressing rooms. So
Hmm.
I got a chance to see the guys outside of character, and Bruiser called us in and called me in individually and said, "You're selling pictures. I think he may have had one." I said, "Yes, sir, I am." And he had known me from taking the pictures, um, for the magazines, and he said, "If you're going to sell them at our show from now on, we're partners." And after the shows were over, and Snyder and Bruiser were the last ones to leave, we were invited into their own personal dressing room to hand over our commission for the day, and we also were invited to drink as much beer as we wanted, but not we weren't allowed to touch Bruiser's beer, which was a Japanese beer.
Oh yeah.
I think Snyder might have been drinking the same thing, but the boys had Falstaff, which was provided by a person that used to escort Dick to the mat to the ring as a more or less civilian. He wasn't a wrestler, but he supplied the beer for Bruiser. His name was Dennis Riedenlinger. And so we not only did they give us the beer, but they let us take home bottles of beer as well. So we were pretty tipsy, very young, before we were even 21. By the time we left the convention center and spending a good 1 hour to 2 hours with Bruiser and Snyder, we were in awe.
How amazing is that? Like, because wrestling's so different today. Like back then, it was just huge, and there was people everywhere. You know, and they had all these larger than life characters. Dick the Bruiser was larger than life to a lot of people.
My dad did
You're
one.
absolutely right. The business, I can't really stand what has happened, although I have put up with it to maintain being relevant to the
Hmm.
business. Um, but I mean, you could do Oxbaker with a carotid clutch on Pepper Gomez, and Pepper would fall asleep, and then he'd make a comeback, and you'd have 10,000 fans stomping their feet. You know, the shrieks and the shrieks of the fans have even changed in noise. If you go and watch world class championship wrestling and watch when the Von Erichs came out, the women and this high pitched scream, it was very similar to Elvis.
Hmm.
And we had the hardcore wrestling fans in Indianapolis who believed in Bruiser. And um, like I said, the shows, the wrestling, the maneuvers, everything's changed thanks to Vince McMahon.
You can definitely see, like you were saying, the shrieks and the shrills, and it doesn't have the feeling as it did. Like,
Exactly. Everything is a kick out, a near three count.
mhm.
You get that dozens of times at every show, and instead of just a punch and a knockout, and you're down, it's raised the bar, so people have had to do different maneuvers. People diving off ladders onto tables, and
Hmm.
you know permanently scarring their body and injuring their body for life because of these stupid maneuvers. When the idea for longevity is to make it as light as you can, but make it look real.
100%.
I agree.
Yeah, for sure. So we are interviewing Scott Romer, but some people may know you as somebody else.
And I am the publisher and author of When It Was My Life on Both Sides of the Camera, available on Amazon and by me. But go ahead. What was your question again?
I said, now we are here interviewing Scott Romer, but there is another name people might know you as when it comes to professional wrestling. What is that?
Well, for the WWA in the mid 80s, 84, 85, I was transitioned as a wrestling character, Saul Creechman. And Eddie Creechman was a famous manager who managed the Noble Sheik, and he was Jewish, and I'm Jewish. And so Bruiser gave me the name Saul Creechman. Another character that was a well known manager that was also Jewish was, why can't I remember his name? Saul Weingroff. And Saul Weingroff, um, let's see, who do you have? The Von Buhner, I forgot who he managed, but Bruiser used him a few times in the early 70s. And so he put my name together with Saul Weingroff and Eddie Creechman, and I became Saul Creechman, and I had the blessings of Eddie Creechman to use that name as well.
I remember the first time I met Scott was at a wrestling show,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't know the name Scott Romer. I knew him as Saul Creechman, because that's what his name was in the show. So, and it was a there was a spot in the show where Scott was out there, and Rob Kincaid beat the living snot out of you, and it was bloody and horrifying to the crowd. The crowd, at that point, even though everybody knew wrestling was a show, they were drawn in. It was real. So you talk about bringing
Well, if
the
I'm not mistaken, on that show, somebody called the police, and the police came. And I'm 63 years old now. I was probably 50. This was 4 or 5 years ago, 57,
Mm-hmm.
58. I was in no shape to do anything really. And so Rob Kincaid and I orchestrated a feud about me not being inducted into his Hall of Fame. And I had received other wrestling trophies from being in the business. Photographer of the Year was one from the Wrestling Fans International Association. And I brought that old trophy to a wrestling show, to one of Basher's shows, and presented it to myself because I'm not going to be inducted into the Indiana Hall of Fame, Indiana Wrestling Hall of Fame by Rob Kincaid. And he came in and belittled me a little bit. I hit him from behind with the trophy, and that's what started the feud. But it wouldn't make sense for me to go over on him in any way
Mm-hmm.
possible, a trained wrestler. So I orchestrated the whole thing. I said, I'm going to come out to my way. When I shake the last person's hand, you are to grab me and throw me into the turnbuckle. And then I'm going to gig, I'm going to juice, and then throw me into the ring and give me a clothesline and finish me off with a figure four where the referee wasn't going to break it up and they had to bring other referees in to help break it up. And I sold it, and I guess it seemed real to the fans, and that's what I wanted. I gigged and may have hit an artery because I was bleeding pretty much. And Basher had just put on a brand new mat cover, so I was crapping that up. And Josh Lewis came in to help me out of the ring, but I told him, Josh, you've got this expensive robe on. Don't touch me. Just let me get up and I'll crawl out or whatever and sell it all the way back to the dressing room.
Speaking, Rob didn't want to put you in the Hall of Fame. You did announce that you are going into another Hall of Fame next year. If you want to talk a little bit about that, it's a big honor.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. Um, Due to capturing the moments that you described, that we both described, it's I've become somewhat popular
Mm-hmm.
among sports enthusiasts and that follow wrestling and boxing, that I am being inducted into the Indiana Sports Hall of Fame in Evansville um, on a on a August the 11th and 12th, a 2 day festivities at the old Indiana Center,
That's awesome.
old National Center, whatever it is, in Evansville, Indiana. And there will be other big names that are going to be inducted as well. So I'm quite honored for this privilege of being
But
inducted into the Hall of
and
Fame.
it's much deserved. I do firmly believe that you are very talented. You are very good at what you do. Like I said, everyone loves you. You do amazing work, and I'm glad that I've gotten to know you over this last
Well,
year.
thank you. If you looked at the old Inside Wrestling, The Wrestler, Sports Review Wrestling, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, you will see a lot of my work from the early '80s, not only on the front cover but lots of stuff on the inside. I became the premier one of the premier wrestling photographers. You had Bill Apter. Well, I was working for Apter,
Mhm.
and he was really the major. Um, he pushed me to the max, as well as Wally Yamaguchi from Japan, where I became a traveling photographer with Gong Magazine, Nippon Sports Publishing.
That's very. Not a lot of people can say that they've done that. That's I find that very interesting and
I was able
amazing.
to work ringside. Uh, Steve Taylor and I were the only two photographers allowed. Steve Taylor was a WWF hired professional photographer for years, and he did the WWF magazine, and I was working for Japan's Gong magazine. So that granted me ringside access because of
Wow.
my pictures being published in the Japanese magazines for the WWF when they first started out. So my stuff was real hot.
Mm.
And I was also working with the NWA during the same period. So I'm really the only person in the business that got away with working with WWF, WW, WWF, and NWA, and working for Dick the Bruiser as a manager. I got away with all that, and it never hampered my ability to take pictures. And I'm the only person that can say that they worked for all the organizations during the same period. You
That's
either worked for one or the other.
That's an accomplishment in
I've got a
itself.
WrestleMania. I've got two WrestleManias under my belt as well.
Which ones did you do?
I did WrestleMania 2, and that's in the book. The photo spread from Japan with my name credited is in my book. And I did the one at Caesar's Palace, but for that one, I was actually no, I apologize. I did Indianapolis when they came to Indianapolis, and I think Andre dropped the belt. I think I can't remember, but during that was many years after the first one that I did,
Hmm.
and so I wasn't really working with WWF, and I had to shoot from a balcony,
yeah.
so it was different.
Yeah.
Ringside, I worked with the new one, what AEW.
Hmm.
Trevor Blanchard got me the gig, but I had to shoot in the cheap seats, and there's no purpose in shooting with ropes in the way. I like being where
Yeah.
the action is. So
I would agree.
I guess that's kind of close getting back into it, but just to keep my wits sharp, I'll shoot wrestling. As the independent groups. I'll be at Heroes and Legends this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are going to be there as well,
Yep.
That's well.
so we could share a table, whatever you want to do.
Yeah. Is it just you, or are
Um,
you
so,
bringing Rip?
well, I'm bringing Dylan Bostic,
Okay.
who is one of my roommates, and Rip's one of my roommates as well. I'll get that out there. So they're all. It's fun having them both. To hear Dylan talk about all the women he's had, it reminds me of the way I used to be when I was in my 30s. So I'm living vicariously through him. And Rip is Rip. And during the 90s, I managed Rip for Circle City Wrestling and other organization. He was doing his group. He was running his own shows, and I was working with him regularly. And we got booked in Chicago. And that's cool when you're working on shows with sharing the dressing room with other big names.
Hmm.
And Rip got me a lot of gigs with wrestlers on with that had big names at one time or another.
Oh yeah. Rip. He's an interesting character. If people don't know him, do you have any good Rip stories?
I turned Rip into a pro boxer, and we were going on the circuit, and he actually fought the national tough man contest winner. Butterbean was what came in runner up. This guy's name was Cody Cox, and there's no way a 44-year-old wrestler, but in good shape, is going to be able to box um, a trained fighter, especially somebody that just won a national championship.
Hmm.
So Rip treated it just like wrestling, and he told Cox how they should do it. And Rip got knocked out, I think, in the first or second round. It's on. I don't think that fight is on YouTube. His one with Monty Cox is, but Rip put on a good performance, and it was they were paying super money. I mean, 1,500 $1,600 for Rip to box, and I was his manager and got a fee for getting him the gig, and um, so he treated it like wrestling and taught the guy spots,
Hmm.
and it was entertaining, and nobody got hurt, and even this guy was a champion, but he's up against a wrestler, and he's thinking, and Rip was jacked back then, so he's also thinking, wow, this guy can possibly hurt me too. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
it was the best, and especially Rip's interest to work it. So if they say is boxing a work, ours was.
Hmm.
There's,
I mean, I think that a lot of it still is. I mean, I think UFC's a lot of it can be a work too. So I mean,
Of course,
it.
yeah.
I mean, all
Nothing's changed. It's similar to sports entertainment,
hmm.
exactly.
Oh yeah.
and you're going to have your designated opponents, people that aren't supposed to wrestle. Now in boxing, or in boxing, I traveled more in boxing than I did wrestling. I was a mule. I was taking fighters with built up records overseas to Europe to get beat up by the Europeans. They were getting 20, $30,000, and I was sticking half their money in my pants and going through customs.
Don't blame you. Don't blame me at all.
There you go. Yeah.
Here's, but the pay was like wrestling. Here's your $100.
Yeah.
But I did travel. I did travel uh, all over the world for $100, and hotel and everything paid for.
That's
It's all
amazing.
in the book. All in the book.
It's all amazing.
All of it for sure. All right. Well, once again, I want to thank you for this interview. Um, I believe my last thing I would like to ask is, without giving too much away about the book, what would you say is one of your favorite stories that you have from your life?
Well, I think I all my favorite stories are in the book. So they all stand out. I mean, there's a girl talking about flashing Fred Burns, and then in the book she says, I might have told him I was 17 at the time. You know, maybe I shouldn't say that, but this was um, early. This was mid 80s. Um, I there's stories about sororities, and my photographer getting laid at every one of them that I would hire. I never did, but I loved hearing his stories. There's Dick the Bruiser story. I didn't mention it yet, but I was married to his daughter and lived next door. She was married to Spike Huber before, and they got back together. There's Tim Riplogle, who wrestles as Dick the Bruiser Jr., that was married to Michelle after me, and then this story is in the book. He She had a spending problem, a great gal, but she had a spending problem, and none of us could afford her. So Tim wasn't getting anywhere financially, so he ran a show, brought Spike Huber and I in. She was with him, and she ended up leaving with Spike Huber, and he married her again. And so there's a somewhat current picture of the three of us in the book, and that story is in the book. That goes down as one of the all time greats. We were a team. We wrestled as the husbands. A team called the Husband. She actually, Bruiser had a dog, and she was the one that escorted the Bruiser dog to the ring. So Spike and I ended up getting knocked out. Or I'm sorry, Tim and I ended up getting knocked out as script. and Spike carried her off, and never, and they left and lived happily ever after, and they have been together. This was nearly 20 years ago. They have been they're remarried, happy. She's doing well, and her kids are doing well. Spike's doing well, and it's good that I can have somewhat of a relationship with all of them.
Right, absolutely. Well, go ahead and show that book one more time before we get out of here.
When It Was, My Life on Both Sides of the Camera. It's available on Amazon, Scott Romer, John Cosper. But if you want me to autograph it, for developmentally speaking clients of yours, if you see this website, if you see this show, mention developmentally speaking, and you've got free shipping and handling. Plus, I will also autograph the book.
No, that's a deal.
That's a deal right there for sure. So if you want the book on Amazon, when you message them, make sure you mention developmentally speaking. That's free shipping and handling and an autograph
Look at you.
for you.
And I've always said it before we go. There's nobody over like Scott Romer.
Nobody more over than Scott Romer for sure.
You guys, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. Hope to be on your show again sometime.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Have a great one. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hey, everybody, it's Morty.
It's Brian.
And thank you for watching today's episode of Developmentally Speaking.
If you could, please click that subscribe button.
And don't forget to punch that bell icon so you can get notified whenever we go live or drop a new video every Monday. Well, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next
Developmentally speaking.